Hello.
Good afternoon, Pimona. We're so glad to have you here in our library week. We thank you for taking the time with us. We'll go straight to the question. As our chairman has introduced you, you are one of the most celebrated Mizo poets writing in English. Can you tell us how this road to literary fame began?
Literary fame. Okay. It's very nice to be here, first of all. And this is the first time I'm seeing your college. I must say I love it. You're so lucky to have a campus like this. And well, I hear that you're going to have a cultural festival tomorrow, which I'd love to be here, but unfortunately I won't be able to make it. So thank you for having me here in the first place, Zote. And to answer your question, I'm not sure. I don't think it's literary fame, but it's just that I've been lucky enough that people outside of the Northeast liked what I was writing, and they offered to publish it in their magazines and so on. So really, I have been writing for a very long time. I mean, I think we all start writing as kids. And, but it was only when I came over here that I remember I was still in the university at that point, and Professor Margaret Zama, there's a group called the Northeast Writers Forum, which is based in Guwahati, but it encompasses all of the Northeast. And what happened was that P. Maggie, as we call her, and I think most of you probably know her, she had asked me if I do any writing, and I said, yeah, I do some poetry and things like that. So she said, okay, because I have to, collect poems from Mizoram and send it on to the Forums magazine and so on. So I gave it to her, whatever I had. And they published it, and the next thing I know, the Forum itself, they kind of invited us to go over to their meets and so on. So in fact, at the beginning I had no idea. I just went along because it was fun to go along. And then I suppose it very slowly happened that, it dawned on me that, okay, people are actually reading what I'm writing. Because you write and you don't expect other people to read, especially when it's poetry or things like that. So it just built up from there. So I don't know, that's really it. It was very unexpected. It's not like I had to send any poems anywhere. It more or less just happened on its own. So that's it. And then from there, I mean, before you know it, you're being published here, there, and everywhere. So that's it mostly.
So going to the next question, these attentions that your works, your poems are receiving, do they affect your writing in any way? Do they give some pressure in your writing?
Well, that's a very annoying question, I must say. Yeah, actually, I have to be honest, because, and even now, I think there's always, see, when you're a writer, especially when you're writing poetry, and this is something that's going to be true of a lot of you who are writing now, and you're beginning to publish, you're beginning to get attention. And it's regardless of whether you write a lot, whether you publish a lot, you get published a lot. So one of the things is that far more than back in the 1950s or even the 1970s or 80s or whatever, there's a lot of, anyone can just go online and publish themselves or get a lot of attention that way. And there's always a lot of pressure, I think, to cater to the crowd, to the audience. And this is something that you have to learn to avoid, especially if you have reached a point where maybe people are actually, kind enough to notice what you're writing. I won't say that I actually felt any pressure because, for one thing, the pressure comes when maybe if you're living in a very literary kind of world, where you're constantly surrounded by writers and you're always aware of what everyone else is doing. But I have been very lucky to be divorced, as I realize now, to be completely divorced from that kind of world. So there was never that pressure. And very, very fortunately, at the beginning when I started writing, so to say, when I started getting published and all that, the people that I met, the writers who had already established themselves, people like Robin Gangom or people like Mamang Dai and so on, they are not at all, they're very humble people, in the sense that even though they had, garnered a lot of attention, they never made me feel like I had to write a particular way. There was never any pressure. Okay, Boda, you're from Mizoram, you have to write about these things, and there was never that. We just talk to each other on the level of as friends and so on. So I managed to avoid all of that. But I realize now that one of the things that, since you asked me that, one of the things is that a particular poem of mine, I think, the Ernestina one. The problem was that I wrote that out of the urge to address a certain social issue, so to say. But that social issue isn't stagnant. It is something that mutates and evolves, and it becomes something else. So a lot of people, as we know, especially from mainland India, they expect the Northeast to be full of problems and full of troubles, insurgencies and all. And I had the feeling that they wanted more of that kind of writing from me, which is definitely, I'm not going to deliver that. If there's nothing to write further on that particular subject, then you don't write about it. So on a personal level, no, I think I managed to escape all of that. But there's always the need to make something exotic. There's always that danger, and you have to keep on fighting that danger. By exotic, I mean you're looking around. This is the life we lead over here. But for people from other places, other countries, from outside of the Northeast, it's always easy to present the Northeast or your particular place as something that is so different from theirs, and you tend to harp on the things that are different. And that is, I think, a danger that you have to keep on avoiding, because by harping on something that you want to present as something exotic and unique to the place, you run into the danger of falsifying it. So I think that's true in poetry as well as in fiction or anything else that you want. That's my...
Well, I know you've been asked this many times, but I would like to ask you again, because considering the amount of attention or appreciation that you have received, you haven't seemed to be in a hurry to have a publication of your own. Why is it so?
But yes, another question that really is, yes, there was a lot of pressure, and I was, in fact, when I started out getting published, I was quite, resolved, or rather very focused on getting something published. But then I went through a pretty rocky phase, personal phase. And the thing was that for quite a while I stopped writing altogether. So, and at that point it would have been really nice if I could have gone on and published things. But I suppose it just didn't happen that way, and which was very fortunate in many ways, because it also gave me the break that I needed to just take a breath and look around and kind of reevaluate the situation around me. So, I mean, if I had published anything back then, I feel like I would have been terribly embarrassed and ashamed of whatever I had written then. Not just because it was so much younger or more youthful or anything. There would have been many things that were wrong about it. But now I feel like, yes, this is a good place. I understand my own land so much better and so on. So, yeah. So that's, it's not because of a lack of trying. I did try, but I just, before I reached the point where I could publish a book, other things happened. So I had to tend to those other things. So now that I have taken care and settled all those other things, I can go back to the writing part of it.
So we can hope for new...
Yeah, I think you can definitely hope, because it's quite a pity, because when I think about it, back then there was this acquaintance of mine. He was the Penguin editor, in fact, and he was always pressing me to, come out with a novel or something like that. And he was a very nice guy, but finally I had to, for one thing, that is what we were talking about, the kind of pressure to perform. And then you have to resist it. And I think if I had given in to that kind of pressure, as I said, whatever book I had come out with, whether it was poetry or if it was fiction, it would have been it would have been very dishonest, so to say. And honesty is, I'm pretty big on honesty, at least. I hope that answers your question.
Two questions in one. What inspired you to write? And why writing? Why have you chosen to write, to express yourself?
Okay. I don't know. Maybe I should ask some of the people over here. I mean, why do you sing? You know, you sing because you can, because you like singing. I can't say there was... See, it's very difficult. For one thing, the first thing that I ever wrote was when I was 8 years old. So I don't know, I mean, what made me write when I was 8 years old, but I had read a lot of things, and I suppose, you know, it comes out in one way or the other. If you're good at singing, or if you like singing, then you start singing, whether you're 5 years old or 10 years old or whatever. And if you're good in writing, I mean, or rather, if your inclination is to write, then you start writing then. And that's the best answer that I can. I mean, at 5 or 8 years old or something, you're not looking at the world and, you know, evaluating it and assessing it and being able to tell whatever is going on in it. You're just a kid. And you start writing, and that was a very silly poem. It was about, you know, some deer dancing on the lawn or something like that. So, it just starts off like that. And you keep on writing. But now that you get older, you write more, you observe the world more, and you realize that that is one way of not just being able to interpret the world for the world to understand, but for you yourself to understand. Excuse me. I think that's very important because, especially on my part, you come in from outside, you come in from a place where, you know, everything is very different, having lived outside most of my life. So when you come back in here, you have to do a lot of adjustments. So writing, and I don't know, please don't ask me why poetry, because, but it was one of the, because poetry is it's a distillation of everything. You don't have room to maneuver when you can't just keep on writing and writing and writing. It has to be done within a set frame, a number of words, and so on. And it really disciplines you in that way. So, and I don't know why exactly it came out in poetry, because if you had asked me before, I would not have said I was a poet at all. I did write some poetry, but I was writing a lot of prose, which is never going to see the light of day, because when you're young and you write all that, all those things, that's very silly now. Anyway, so you start writing, and then the important thing is not the starting of it, it is to continue it. And it's very, very easy to just be overwhelmed by life. I'm sure many of the people here, many of the young people here, you're writing, whether it's music or whether it's words, as in poetry or as in fiction, a lot of you will be expressing yourselves. And then life, it'll come and overwhelm you. And the important thing is just to continue writing. At times you will have to stop, as I had to. But then the important thing, as I said, is to pick up the reins and keep on your way. So that is it, really. I mean, there's no one way to answer how you write, why do you take this rather than that. But it's just the things that we do, I suppose. Yeah.
Somewhere in an interview, you had said that you grew up, just to inform the students, Mona was born in Patna, Bihar. So, yeah. And you grew up surrounded by trees and books. And my question would be, which activity back then did you prefer to pass your time? Reading books or climbing trees?
Yeah, I liked doing both. You can do both, you know. I don't know why this dichotomy. That's one of the things. Since my father was a government officer and we traveled a lot, and back in the mainland, especially if you're in the rural areas, the places where you stay are those old colonial buildings that have huge grounds. The gardens are really vast. So we did a lot of climbing of trees. I didn't do a lot of writing at that point. I was very young then. But it kept on going, and I read a lot, and it's very important, I think. So I think one of those, and I don't know where did you read this interview? I thought it was very obscure. I don't know where you got that from.
I think it was in 2009.
Okay.
The Hindu.
Oh, okay, yeah. Yes, I remember that. So to get back to your question, yes, I did a lot of both, and it's one of the things that has always, I think, sustained me. Trees are, I don't remember who it was. I think it was somebody, an American actress, Glenn Close, I think. And she said that one of the most important things is during your formative years, childhood, no panlai, to be close to nature. And I had that opportunity. And she says that it's important because it sustains you throughout life. And I agree with her completely. There's something about being a child and being among trees, being in the open spaces, or being, just in the wilderness. And you grow up, and life will simply throw any kind of rubbish at you, and there will be times when you can't deal with it. But if you have had a childhood where you were close to nature, where you were free to roam around in nature, it comes back, and it's very, very subtle, because you don't really think back, when I was a kid, I used to climb trees or anything. But that memory is there. It's imprinted not just in your brain, but it's imprinted in your body, in yourself. And that, it really, really sustains you. That sense of having once been in a space that is free and is open, there's nobody there, it's just you and nature, that really, really does sustain you. So I think it's one of the things that, you draw back upon, especially later in your life, I suppose. So that's really quite there.
And as a writer, how much of your reading of books have enriched you? You have read many books, widely read. How have they enriched you in your process of writing?
Okay, I think I'll turn the question this way. It is almost impossible to start writing if you have not read before. If you are not yourself a good reader. By good reader I mean if you are reading a lot, you will write. It doesn't matter whether you go on to become a writer or whether you're just writing for yourself privately, you have a diary, but it is impossible to turn into a writer without having first been a reader, which I think goes with the theme of this library week very well. And we were talking back then, in fact, when we were sitting in, just before lunch, when we were sitting over there, and we were having a discussion, and I don't know how how our conversations always keep on turning into one thing or the other. But we were talking about reading. And I think for a lot of us, we don't realize how important reading is. And I was telling Vimoy that, for example, just look at America right now. They have landed with this horrible man called Donald Trump as their president. They have been writing analysis after analysis in their magazines, the newspapers, soul searching. How did we reach this point that we have elected a man who is, as somebody said, the most singularly unqualified presidential candidate in history? How did they get stuck with this person? And we know, if you have been reading the international papers and all, you must be quite aware that he has been making a lot of trouble for America and the world. So I said, see, they have been doing a lot of soul searching, the Americans. And the thing about America, as they themselves admit, and by America I mean the US of A, of course, the United States, since for a very long time, they have had a very deeply anti-intellectual trend in them. And it's almost inevitable that in the end, when you are saying that, oh, books are not important, reading is not important, education is not important, to the extent that your political parties or people who are in power keep on defunding or cutting down on education, just belittling the fact that you're reading, obviously at the end you're going to end up with somebody as ignorant and shallow and superficial as Trump. So, I think we all want to avoid this fate. So what I'm saying is that we have to read. You have to read. You can't rely simply on, going on the net and, okay, let me look at this news flash, or let me just read this article. Because the act of reading a book is very different from reading something on screen or watching TV. And watching TV will make you dumber. So I would suggest that, just switch off your TVs. That is one thing. So reading is a precursor to writing. And writing itself, I think it was, Simone de Beauvoir. She's one of the early feminists. She has said, one of her friends, who is also she was a very well-known French writer, she had said, I write, but I'm not an intellectual. And Beauvoir told her, no, you write, therefore you are one. And by intellectual, we don't mean somebody who has to, you don't have to write very important books, you don't have to have PhD after your name, or doctor or professor. The mere act of thinking about the world, and critically thinking about the world, not just accepting everything, that makes you somebody who's not just intelligent, but an intellectual. And if you express yourself in writing, you are an intellectual. So, and the only way to get to that point is by reading. You can't do this by sitting in front of the TV at all. So, definitely, it's one of the things when you said, you're having a library week and so on. So I was thinking, oh, that's great. It's wonderful that they have, that they put the library as something important, that they have an entire week devoted to it, whatever your activities within it might be. So that's it. I'll say yes, so yay, keep on reading. And you'll go on to have families of your own, make your kids read. And the only way your kids are going to read are if you yourself read. If you don't read, your kids won't read. We will have a lot more dumber people in the world, and in the end we'll end up with another Trump. So please, let's try to avoid that fate.
What kind of books do you read? You prefer to read?
A lot of books. Besides poetry, obviously, I read a lot of fiction. Not fiction so much. Non-fiction, a lot of non-fiction. Going back to, I suppose, things like, Fukuyama's The End of History and so on, but that has been completely debunked right now. History has not ended. We are entering a very interesting phase right now. And a lot of what we can only call the new feminist theories of looking at gender and so on, which is very interesting. And I hope that you kind of incorporate it in your syllabus one of these days, because, you have to catch up with whatever the world is thinking right now. First, we bring the developed world, of course. So I read a lot of that, and it's not confined to any one thing. And it's quite a lot of topics and so on, from all over the world, as far as possible, as far as translation is possible, yes.
Earlier you mentioned that, regarding the writings from Northeast India, there has been many conceptions of what it should be and what kind of writings should be produced. Do you think these writings should be categorized under such blanket terms as rootedness or tribal identity?
See, one of the things that you have to realize is that no writer, whether they are writing poetry or whether they are writing fiction, sits down thinking, okay, now I'm going to write something that is going to fall under the category of, tribal writing or Northeast writing or anything. We don't think that. What happens is the academies, the academies start dividing it into this. Because, and I don't blame them, because as long as we're humans, we have a need to categorize things. And for people who are studying literature, you can't just study literature as an entire lump. You have to divide things again. okay, this belongs to the 16th century, now this belongs to the 19th century, this belongs to this region, this belongs, and there is a reason for that, because although we are all people, as we say, although we are all humans, we are affected and influenced by local customs, local traditions, local ways of thinking, and all of it, and these are all different from each other. So when you talk about these categories, these classifications, I won't say they're false. They certainly have validity, but as I said, coming purely from a writer's perspective, nobody sits down thinking, okay, now my poem is going to fall under the category of, of 21st century Northeast Mizo writing or something like that. You just write and then it happens later, whatever. We don't really care about that end of things anymore. Was that a pure question?
If we have any questions from the audience. Let's open the floor for discussion or questions.
My question would be for people of our generation, especially being situated inside Mizoram, even if we like writing as an expression, there's a very difficult obstacle that we have to face because I hope I'm not offending anyone, the Mizoram literary scene is very much supportive and appreciative of literature, any form of literature that is either socially driven, politically driven, that in one way or another expresses our traditions, and it is being very much encouraged. And so, what do you think? What do you think of the situation here? Because the only way to become a relevant writer in Mizoram seems to be to write about something that is connected to the local politics or the tradition and the culture. So what is your response and what is your approach and view regarding this?
Candle, yes, it's nice to see you again. I didn't know you were sitting over there. Thank you for the question. I think that's a very, very important question, and it strikes right at the heart of the Mizo literary scene, as you said, whether you're writing in English or Mizo. And I'm going to give you an answer. See, there are many ways. When you asked that question, there were instantly two things that stood out. Number one is, we are going through a phase, we Mizos are going through a phase where we are now starting to go back and discover our roots, so to say. This is the trend these days. We are discovering ourselves, we are going back, we are being proud of what we are, and things like that, which is fine. The other thing is that I believe, especially I think most of the students here, if you're writing in English, your question becomes almost moot. Nobody is going to read you here anyway. Okay? So now, your question is that, and I suspect you're asking that because you can't really find yourself, doing the things that they expect of you. And I would say that you're very lucky that you even feel this pressure. Because then, now that you feel that pressure, and we were talking about the kind of pressure that writers have to face, especially budding writers. You are young, write whatever you want. It doesn't have to be socially relevant, social message in heaven. And I think that is, in my opinion, my very humble opinion, I think this is one area that Mizo writing, by that I mean writing in Mizoram, is going very, very wrong, in the sense that they always feel they have to have a message. You don't need a message all the time. Okay. So that's it. That's one way I would answer that. Don't have to feel that pressure. Write what you want. Some of them may be socially relevant or politically relevant. It might be this, it might be that. But the first thing is that you have to write and be honest. Honesty in the writing. And if you're writing this because, okay, there's pressure from outside saying, unless you write it like this, you're not going to be relevant, that is already pressure. And if you give in to it, you're already being dishonest. I'm going to tell you right now that if you are being dishonest, your writing will not stand the test of time. Now the second thing is, If you're writing in English, you have two traditions to draw from, much more than people who are confined to writing in Mizoram. You have the entire, ocean of literature available in English, and it is vast. I'm not just talking about people writing originally in English, but translations. Japanese literature there. Go even, you have Mongolian literature translated in English. You have all of this available to you. So many ideas, so many ways of looking at the world. So instantly, when somebody says, okay, write about just this corner of the world, you will feel instantly constrained. And you're feeling that. So I'm saying, and my only answer, and it will always be my answer, don't listen to that. Yes, sometimes you will come across something, living here in Mizoram, in Aizawl, and you feel like you have to address it. And address it as honestly as you can. Other than that, if it really shouldn't even arise. I don't know why there is this pressure, because as I said, I have never felt this pressure from writers in English. Whether they are from the Northeast or from outside Northeast, nobody ever said, okay, what you're writing is not relevant. Where's the social message? Where's the political message? Because they are writing for the pure love of writing. And along the way, it may turn out to be something that is very important for society as a whole. Or it may just be something that is locally and very confined just to your own experiences or to individual experiences. It doesn't matter. The two things they often mingle. So Kalaya Kanin, my answer is that just ignore this and just keep on going the way you're going. And by the way, though you didn't ask, you know that we had that hill talk the last time, and unfortunately Udonge is now very ill, so we have not been able to do very much since one of our members. One of the things that we were thinking about is how to bring more of our young writers into the limelight, into having more exposure outside. Because for one thing, I think many of you are very good writers, and you definitely need to be published more and more outside. I don't know how well you're doing on your own. You might say, oh, you don't need to take care of us or anything. Okay, but we will be going on that line, and hopefully many of you will continue writing. As I said, it's not just starting writing, it is to continue writing that is important as well. So two things I would like, if there's anything that I would like you to take away from this particular session, is that my advice, such as it is, will be, number one, continue writing. Number two, don't try to be relevant. If you try to be relevant, you're going to fall into irrelevance. And number three, which is kind of related again to number two, just because everyone is doing this, or you feel the pressure that you have to write a particular way, don't do it. Okay? Because the first thing, and this is again why poetry I think is so important. Poetry, you can't lie in poetry. There is no way that the muse of poetry will tolerate you being dishonest with yourself. And it's not really. You can lie if you're writing in prose, if you're writing a story, a novel. You cannot lie in poetry. And I think anyone who has written poems will understand what I'm talking about. Thoughts are any author writing within a poem. So that is it. I hope that this kind of does answer your question. If there's anything more, please don't hesitate. And since I was, I was very happy to make your acquaintance, Candle, everyone else who came that day. And it was wonderful, by the way. I was very impressed. And I would like to see more of your, and talk to you more for that matter. You studying here right now? Close off, let's say. You're studying here right now. Okay. So hopefully that, we'll be having some readings and so on. Informal readings. We will be certain to invite you as well.
I was to ask you if you have any advice for the students currently that Thank you. We hope to have another session in the future.
Yes. Thank you, Zote. Thank you, Mizo.